Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. Today I wanted to sit down and talk about a subject that I briefly mentioned in my somewhat recent life updates video. Of course, the subject I'm talking about is why I became vegetarian. I know I mentioned a few things then, but I thought I could go a bit more in depth into it today, since I guess at this point in time when I sit down to film this, it's about 2 months since I've become vegetarian, so not long, even though it was a long time coming, and I cut meat for quite a while before I fully decided just to go all in and become a vegetarian. I guess I thought I'd talk about my thought process and how I kind of changed into stopping eating meat. And I want to clarify, I'm not talking about any of these sorts of things from a judgmental place. Obviously, I ate meat for most of my life, and I'm not here to judge anyone who still does. You know, if you eat meat and maybe take something positive away from this, that's great. If you don't, it doesn't really matter. This video is just me talking about my experience and hopefully you find it interesting. So I'm just about to get started. I guess I will talk a little bit about my eating habits. I guess I've been a meat eater or an omnivore for most of my life, for nearly 26 years. I've just recently turned 27, but most of my life up until recently, and in the past few years, I've really not given it much thought, I guess, what I was eating, or I think that came from a point of not wanting to stress on the matter or feeling a little bit guilty, and it's not something I really identified with at the time, but looking back, I definitely think that was the case. I guess I grew up in a family where, you know, everyone ate meat and it was always part of lunch or dinner. I think I said this in my life updates, it was just very normal. However, my older sister, I remember when I was a little kid, and I think she was a teenager, because she's a few years older than me, she decided she wanted to be a vegetarian. Now, this was in the 90s, and I think mum and dad have mentioned recently, and they probably used to talk about it back then, that, and I guess I don't want to throw them both under the bus, maybe it was just mum or maybe it was just dad, but I vividly remember this story of the action that was taken, where they bought bad vegetarian food or gross or ugly sort of vegetarian food back then to try and put her off because they didn't understand it. I guess obviously there weren't as many choices back then, and not everybody really got the idea on why you'd want to be vegetarian. Maybe they thought it was weird, who knows. Obviously she was a teenager and living at home, so she kind of had to eat what they were giving her, and they didn't really support it. Now they do. She's vegetarian, or she's been vegan for the past few years. She's been vegan for a long time, and she's been vegetarian most of her life. My other sister is also vegetarian and has been for a few years. So I guess they were an influence on me. I also happen to work with a lot of vegetarians, and in most jobs and most situations where I meet people, I feel like I know a lot of vegetarians because obviously it's quite common these days, or more common than it used to be. Same with vegan diets, and even just people who still eat meat, cutting back and, you know, meat-free Monday, doing those sorts of things. It's become a lot more normalized. And not even just meat, I feel like most people that I know don't drink cow's milk anymore for whatever reason, whether they have dairy intolerance or whether they don't like the taste of cow's milk, whether they don't want to drink cow's milk, whether they're vegan or not. I know for myself, I'm not vegan, I'm not completely dairy-free, but I haven't had cow's milk in maybe a year. It's been quite a while, and that's just for the choice that I don't really want to contribute to that industry anymore. Again, I'm not fully dairy-free though. I have cheese and normally cream I cook with quite sparingly, but I guess maybe in the future I'd like to move towards being dairy-free. I suppose that's another subject though, but I guess my point on that is obviously a lot more people are eating either no meat or less meat, and same with dairy. I guess I'll be honest on why I ate meat. At first, it was always out of habit, just because that's what I grew up eating with my family. I guess, you know, vegetarian households will just grow up being vegetarian, and maybe sometimes you'll change. Like my father-in-law, for example, he grew up with both of his parents being vegetarian and didn't eat meat until he was 18 years old. Now he loves it, and he'll probably not go back to being vegetarian. For myself, obviously, it wasn't something that was a long time brewing when I was a kid. I guess I hadn't given much thought into being vegetarian a few years ago. It's something that I'd maybe considered when one of my sisters would bring it up, but I think I definitely was eating meat out of habit just from my upbringing, and of course it was selfish reasoning. Now, just bear with me here. I know some people might flinch hearing me say selfish. It's selfish to eat meat. I'm not going to go on that tangent or anything like that. I think for myself, I was eating meat for selfish reasons. At the time, it was easy. Meat is in a lot of dishes when you go out to eat. There's a big section of meat at the supermarket, and it's also something that I just knew how to cook. Many meals I knew had meat in them, and I'll be honest, I did enjoy the taste at the time. I think looking back now, I don't miss it. I don't miss the taste, but back then I definitely liked meat. One of my favorite things, for example, to go out and eat was blue steak, obviously where it's not very cooked at all. Almost raw beef steak, and it's just cooked on the outside enough to be able to be edible. I used to love it. It was one of my favorite meals. Now, I can see where even meat eaters think that's kind of gross, like it's pretty much raw meat, but yeah, I don't miss that. I think part of the reason why is because I've done this very gradually, and I'll get more into that in a sec, but I just wanted to clarify. I think I was eating meat for selfish reasons, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Obviously, I have my own thoughts on why I don't want to eat meat. I don't want to push it on anyone else or anything like that, but that's just how I'd explain it. And obviously, ignoring diet and, eating sort of choices, there are many selfish things in life. Sometimes people have kids for selfish reasons, or it could be a positive thing. You might be selfish and really focus on your career. It doesn't always have to be negative. Now, I guess jumping back to these people in my life that were vegetarians and vegans, they were always a pretty positive influence on me. I don't think my sisters or anyone I ever worked with was sort of judgmental and put me down for eating meat at the time. They were always just very helpful and educational, I guess. And I really appreciate that, because I know a lot of people, or not a lot of people, but it is definitely a bit of a stereotype on vegetarians and vegans. That little joke about, oh, how will you know if someone's vegetarian? They'll tell you. I guess I didn't really have anyone like that in my life, and I'm very grateful. I think sometimes when people have that approach towards others, it can make their sort of cause a little bit off-putting, and I think this sort of way that people spoke to me about it, I also want to speak to other people and want to speak to you. If you're watching this video now, whether you're vegetarian or not, I'm not wanting to be trying to push anyone for anything. I'm obviously saying the benefits in my life since I turned vegetarian and my reasons for it. And again, like I said, if you take anything from that, that's great, but I'm not out here to change anyone's opinion necessarily by badgering them like certain people on YouTube, if you know what I mean. But yes, these people in my life that were vegetarian or vegan were a positive influence, and I think definitely spending time with them and just thinking a little bit differently, trying different foods as well, because I definitely consider myself quite a foodie. I've tried a lot of meat substitutes, dairy substitutes, and over time just started to eat less and less meat. And part of it is definitely because there are great meat alternatives now, so easy in the supermarket, especially in Australia. I don't know about other countries, but I feel like many places around the world surely would be moving along at a similar pace of having alternatives. And even, for a long time, there's been plenty of alternatives, but I suppose now it's a lot more readily available and marketed towards people, if that makes sense. Like the meat-free mince that I get at Woolies is in the meat section. Maybe some people would find that quite off-putting if they're a vegetarian for a long time. Maybe they don't want to be near the rest of the meat, I don't know. But I think placing it in an area like that makes it seem a little bit more approachable for people who wouldn't necessarily go into different sections in the supermarket. Maybe they'd see it and want to give it a go. I think I'm continuously getting sidetracked here. A point I'm wanting to make is I was eating less and less meat for a long time. Now, I guess over the past few years, as I've eaten less and less meat, I've become a little bit more off-put by it as time would go by, and I'd therefore eat less. So I definitely didn't set out to be vegetarian. I think I'd had it as a fleeting idea, but over time I would just try alternatives, and I liked them, and I would just be off-put by meat. Of course, I would consider myself a huge animal lover, and I'll be honest, I felt very guilty eating it, and I think I didn't want to think about it, and I didn't want to watch any meat documentaries because I knew how sick I'd feel. I still haven't watched any meat documentaries, and I don't know if I will. Maybe some people will think that's quite ignorant. Obviously, I've cut out meat, so the goal has been met. I know sometimes people will just watch some sort of meat, or I don't even know how to describe it, like anti-meat documentary and be put off meat for life, but I didn't want to do that. I did it very gradually. Again, like I said, I felt quite guilty whenever I'd think about it, and I guess just certain factors wouldn't make me feel very good, like meat mince, that you'd make bolognese with or whatever. Meat mince always made me feel so sick to smell, and obviously that's a common thing that people cook with. I definitely cooked with it a lot for myself and my fiance, and even though I'd eat it, just the smell of it would make me feel so sick. And I can remember times that I would cook with chicken. Somehow touching raw chicken makes my skin itch. I don't know if anyone else has that, but that was such a strange thing, and I thought, this is so weird. But I was eating meat less and less. And about this time last year, I really started to cut back, eating a lot more alternatives and having meat less and less days in the week. So I started having, one meat-free meal a week with my partner. We were doing this together, and then I just started eating more and more alternatives and skipping meat a lot more. Of course, I've tried to substitute the vitamins that I need by eating certain things. I'm always trying to get enough protein and iron through other sources. I've just started iron supplements since I need a little bit of help in that department, and that's going okay. But I really do try and have quite a full and healthy diet. I feel like I've spoken about this before. I'm not on any diet as such, but when I use that word, I'm just talking about the food that I eat. I always really try and get as much fruit and veg as I can in the day. And yes, eating meat less and less as this past year has gone by, up until the point a few months ago where I was very nearly close to being vegetarian, but I don't think I wanted to change almost out of a fear of making that commitment. And it sounds weird to explain, but looking back, I can definitely see it. There would be weeks that would go by without me eating meat, and then I'd eat a little bit here or there, and I just thought, I'm not vegetarian. I'm not vegetarian yet. I don't know why I'm not, but I'm just not making that full change and that full commitment. Obviously now I have, so about 2 months ago, I just fully cut it out. And I think it wasn't a certain time where I thought, on this day I'm gonna cut out. I just ate meat one day, and then a week went by without me having it, and another week, and I realized I haven't had meat, and I'm just not going to have it again. I think there were all these sorts of little factors that have contributed to it over the past year and even years, and now I'm finally at a place where I definitely don't ever want to eat meat again. In fact, I feel like something that almost gave me this final push, even though I didn't recognize it at the time. Can you tell there's a bit of a thread here? I feel like all these things, when I look back on them, contributed, but at the time I didn't give it much thought. I guess I'll explain. While I said I haven't seen any anti-meat documentaries, I did watch something on Netflix. You might have seen it as well, or seen something similar. It was the Our Planet documentary series on Netflix, narrated by David Attenborough. It was all about environmentalism, so it really didn't have anything to do with the meat industry, but it did, as a documentary normally would, have many scenes of animals, and a lot of scenes of animals, predators chasing their prey. And it sounds like a weird connection that I sort of made, but I remember watching, I think it was a polar bear or something chasing a little seal, and I just remembered thinking in that moment, I don't want to be a predator. I know that sounds really weird to say out loud, and I've told a few people that's something that kind of gave me the final push, and I feel like it's a little bit funny to say again now, but it's true. I don't want to be that sort of animal. Obviously we're people, we're not in the food chain in terms of other people or animals trying to eat us, because we live in the modern world, but there's no need for me to try and kill another animal, eat another animal in order to survive. I literally don't need it, and I'm not getting into that nitty-gritty side of things. I'm just saying, again, my thoughts on what has gotten me to this point, and I think that sums everything up. So I know lots of random things I've spoken about. I don't even know if I'll upload this or if I want to wait to kind of condense my thoughts a little bit more clearly, but I suppose this is all just natural, me spouting off everything. I think me being vegetarian now is one of the best decisions that I've ever made, and I honestly never want to go back. I think it, as kind of tooly as it sounds, it feels like a great secret that I just want to share. And again, it sounds like I'm trying to get people into a cult, but I just wanted to put this video out there. If anyone can maybe connect with anything I'm saying, or if you're interested in how things are going for me, that's just a little update on a subject that I shared in my recent life update. So I guess that's probably everything I needed to share today. I do want to point out as well that I'm not really going to change anything on my channel. I think obviously in vlogs I show what I cook, and I'll share some interesting things as I try them. Maybe I can try some new recipes. There are definitely some vegan and vegetarian meals that I do want to try and make, and I think I might do some cooking videos as well, since there are things that I've learned how to cook over this past year. I feel like I've tried to recreate a lot of my favorite foods that did include meat, but now obviously include alternatives. So one thing that I definitely love to make, and one thing I feel like I've finally perfected, is a meat-free Japanese curry. I do it out of tofu. I still crumb it up, and I think it's amazing, so maybe I can show you how to make that sometime. Alright, but now I think I'll be leaving this video here. I just wanted to thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this one, or found it interesting, or were able to take something away from it. Please give me a thumbs up if you did, and subscribe if you haven't already. But like I said, I will be leaving you here, so I just wanted to thank you once again for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Bye!